The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guest, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, and welcome to Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea. Today's guest lost her father in one of the most tragic ways. My hope for today's episode is that with her sharing her story, you will be able to learn how to deal with similar tragedies in the best way possible. I also hope that you can see that even when life gives us some of the most difficult moments, we're still able to move forward. Let's welcome today's guest, Sam, the branding coach. Welcome, Sam.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy you're here too. And I know this is also not probably the easiest of stories to share, but I think there are so many people that can relate to this story and that have gone through this. And just go ahead and tell us a little bit about what happened.
Yeah. The crazy thing before I get into it is that I feel like it used to be really hard to talk about. And now, progressively, as I've talked about it more and more and more, it's gotten a lot easier. But I can't believe it's literally been like 3.5 years almost. But my dad committed suicide, and it was a hard one for sure. He I don't know what, his overall struggles were. I think, he was going through a lot at the time, and I won't go too far into the things that happened beforehand, but ultimately he did some things that just really caught up to him.
Mhm.
And I think that I don't want to say that I would agree with like where he would go, but I mean, knowing my dad,
Mhm.
I don't think he was the man that would have survived like going to prison or going to jail. So he chose his own path and decided to commit suicide and take his own life in his garage. So it was a hard thing to deal with, I think.
Absolutely. Do you feel like once you started sharing your story with other people, you kind of felt better because you were like, wow, actually, this has happened to a lot of people? Like, did you start hearing more from people like, oh, actually, my dad did that, or my uncle did that, or like, did you start hearing of more stories as you shared your own?
Actually, no.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
think I so like now it's weird. I didn't really have this realization until maybe a couple of months ago. And I think it was like maybe April or May when one of my friends had called me and she was like, oh, like one of my friends committed suicide. Like, I just don't know what to do. Like, how did you navigate it? And I was like, oh,
Mhm.
like I am in that statistic of having to like lose a family member from that. And I was
Yeah.
just like, oh, like it really didn't hit me until after that conversation. So I think when I was going through it, talking about it, like it was such a multifaceted situation that it was just not really easy for the
Mhm.
people around me to digest. I didn't really have like a very strong foundation of people who were able to like walk me through it and like help me through it. Which is okay. As I've learned over time, not everyone is going to be able to digest your trauma. And simply you're going to weed out the people who aren't going to be there for you. And so like the more I talked about it and the more that I shared what was going on in my life, I felt like the more I lost people.
Mhm.
But honestly, like now that I look back at it, I'm just like, dude, that's fine. Like you guys weren't meant to be in my life anyway. So I really had to find solace in myself and find solace in therapy and build a new support system through that and really find the strength within myself to get through healing, because that was the only person that I could rely on at that time other than my
Yeah.
therapist.
What do you think it was about your story that made people walk away from you or not be able to be around you? Like, did anybody say anything like this is just too much? Or do you think it was, I mean, do you think sometimes some people have dealt with their own past mental issues and it's too close to home for them where it's like they've battled that themselves and they just can't hear about it? I mean, what do you think it was that made you're saying some people walked away from you and you
Mhm.
lost people in your life? Like, do you know why?
I mean, so I'm 25 and I've gone through a lot of life in my 25 years of living. And I mean, for this to be 3 years ago, like I was 22 when I lost my dad. And
That's a lot for that time period in your life. Like for an early 20-year-old to, yeah, I
Mhm.
feel that. It's like, oh man, she's dealing with some major stuff. And yeah, that's a lot for anyone. But yeah, at that age to mentally be able to even know how to support somebody through that. I mean, a lot of us don't even know how to support somebody through cancer death or just
Yeah.
death in general, right? Of old age and things like that. Sometimes it's hard to know what is the right thing to say because the right thing to say, it varies person to person, right? And sometimes nothing is the right thing to say. Sometimes people just want to be left alone because that's the grieving process that they want to have. Like it's very difficult, but okay, that makes a lot of sense. I can see.
Yeah. There was, I mean, like, I get it, like after really talking about it with my therapist of just being like, dude, like, why is everyone leaving? And like all of the things of like feeling that at the time. But it was just like people around me, like, I have found a lot of my friends are older than me, like, like you. And like, I have multiple friends that are like 45 and like 55. And I have like friends that are 63. Like, I don't age, like, there's no age discrimination just to like the people that I connect with. But I found that people who are older than I am and people who have lived more have been able to help me through more than the people my own age. I was living abroad in Paris, and right when COVID happened, I came home, and my dad's girlfriend that he had for 10 plus years, she then, died of cancer in April of 2020, and he was a year and a month later. So it was a lot. Like when I came home from not even just like living my best year abroad, but
Yeah.
to then come home to not even just lose one person to, like you said, just cancer, and just like not even knowing how to navigate that. And then a year later, it being my dad, it was just like, oh, like simply what do we do with this? I had known her and she was in my life for 10 years, but just navigating grief wasn't really on the top of my mind. So her death didn't really hit as strongly as my dad's did. Obviously, that person's a little bit removed from my life, but it still was just sad. It was still hard, but I don't think it all really caught up to me until after my dad. And then, really walking through it, because I was so like when someone commits suicide in your life, I feel like the one thing that I strongly, like, I personally believe, and I am not really a religious person, I'm much more energetics and spiritual, but I love the idea of purgatory in Catholicism, because when you, I feel like when you commit suicide, like your soul is just kind of stuck, because like you made a choice and you either have to fulfill your soul's mission or like what you were meant to do, or you're just kind of like in this plane. I was so mad when my dad died. I was so pissed off at him. But I was also hurt, and just there were so many different emotions. Suicide doesn't just come with one thing, it comes with a whole package of things. So learning how to navigate to unpack that was ridiculous. There's so many things that unfolded from it. So it was just a lot.
So tough question, but did you take on any responsibility in your mind after?
Clarify that a little bit more for me.
Like, did you take on any responsibility or blame or like guilt? Did you feel like, I guess the best way to put this is, did you feel like maybe you could have done something to have prevented the passing? And by no means am I saying that you
Mhm.
could have. I just know
Yeah,
it
yeah.
seems like that's a common thought of people when they lose someone in any way, shape, or form, right? It's often like, if I would have done this, or I should have done this, I could have done this. And I'm just curious if those were any of your thoughts.
I think walking through his house the day or two after his body was like found and everything, I had such empathy. I had such empathy for that man. I was just like, he must have felt so alone. Like his whole house felt without a soul. Like he was just living in this place that just it felt empty. And I
Yeah.
was just like, you it just translated to just being like, damn, like you're gone now and this is how you were feeling. So for me, the one thing I battled with was the last conversation I had with him. I had seen him in February and he had passed in May. I had seen him we hung out one no, actually it was March. It was like my spring break. I was in college at the time and I needed a break. I was living with my mom and I was like, "Love you, mom, but I really got to go." So like give me a couple days out of the house. So like I called him and I was like, "Hey, do you want to come with me?" Like low key being like, "Ah, just like come pay for like the hotel for me because I don't want to." And he did and I was like grateful, but we hung out and he was just being weird. Um and we hung out and this was like the first time that he was like, "If you're not awake by the time I'm up, like I'm leaving." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I woke up and I saw him driving away and I was like, "Hey, what the hell?" Well, I said this and I was like, "Dude, you've never done this to me. Like what the freaking." I call him and so we go get breakfast, but he was just very quick to leave and I was like, "Okay, love you, like bye." But that was the last time I physically saw him because not even 2 hours later did I get a call about so many other things. And I was just like, oh shit, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to translate this. So I was dealing with that. And so then my relationship with him over the next couple of months kind of diminished because I was trying to graduate college. I was trying to deal with the phone call that I had received. And
And the phone, I know we don't want to get into like his
mhm,
business too much in his details, but
mhm.
the phone call, I'm assuming, is just about like things that were going on in his life. And so you were like, wow, he's got a lot on his plate. Okay. And
Yeah.
when you say he was weird, like he came to this meetup and he was just weird, you mean just kind of like different than usual, like different headspace, just seemed off sort of thing?
Yeah, different than usual. It was hard because once his girlfriend died, it was like I was his rock for like a year. Like I was really like the person like we hung out a lot. I would go down and see him and I was like constantly checking in on him. And I was the person that got the phone call when they found his body. And I was like, "Oh, so I was your emergency contact." Like that's crazy. So like there was just a lot of reliance on me and I knew him and I was just like it took a lot to kind of like at first I didn't really think anything of it. I was just like, okay, like you're kind of being just like weird, like why are you pushing me out the door sort of thing. But I was just like, okay, dad, whatever. But afterwards I unpacked it a little bit more and I was just like, damn, there was a lot of things that were in there. There was just a lot of things that just you could see of like a jittery person, like, "Oh, I just have to go, I have to get out of this space." We talked on the phone every like week or so or every now and then after that. And then I think the real guilty part was like the last phone call that we had was just like so his official death date is like June 4th, but I 100% believe that like he committed suicide on like May 26th because he wasn't found for like a week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that Memorial Day is always kind of hard for me because I think like at the time his cousin was supposed to come down and ride bikes with him. So I think his hope was maybe someone was supposed to come
Mhm.
sooner than they
Mhm.
did. It wasn't until after that I was just like we call him my uncle as my dad's cousin, but it wasn't until after that he was like, "Oh, I was supposed to come," and I sent him a text and like, "Hey, we're not coming anymore," but he never responded. I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh," so I think he was there for like a week,
Okay.
and we never got an autopsy officially of knowing when the date was, but I know for a fact because that was the last thing that he did. But it was like a day before the 26th, and we talked on the phone, and he was just mad at me. I like had spent I was like that daughter who had like his card connected to my DoorDash. And so whenever I would order food, I'd be like, oops, wrong card. And he finally got tired of my bullshit. And he was like, just freaking stop. Like, this is not true. Like, just stop. And I was like, okay, like, sorry. It was just a really aggressive, like, okay, love you. Bye. And it was just like, that was our last conversation. So that's kind of the only thing I really felt guilty of, because I mean,
Those door dashes.
yeah, those DoorDashes and just like that conversation. Cause like, I wish I just got to talk to him more, and calling, just be him, like talking on the phone with him was just like part of my daily life. And like, if I called my mom, I then called my dad. And like, I still get that feeling sometimes of like, when I got off the phone, I'm like, want to call my dad. So it's just like, shit, like that, just like, it wasn't there anymore. So that's that took me some time to get over.
I mean, it sounds like he was just kind of at his wit's end with you and other people and things in his life and just
Yeah.
couldn't do it anymore. But it sounds like maybe you didn't take on too much guilt or responsibility, like, I could have, I should have, because you understand that. But I feel like I often hear from so many people that have dealt with this type of situation, like, if I would have called them the day before, if I would have done this, or so for the people that feel that way, like, what would you say to them? I mean, you've been there, you've gone through it. So what would you say to those people?
I have been one of those unfortunate people who has seen a lot of suicide. I grew up in a mountain town, and it was like 7 suicides in like 7 years. And like, my mom and I were just like, we got to get out of here. It was just a toxic environment. Every single time that happened, I think the biggest thing that was always a reflection is I still have this sort of like inkling of, I always want to call and make sure everyone's okay. Like, I always get stressed out when I don't hear from someone for like a certain amount of time. I'm like, oh, like, did something happen to you? Like, are you okay? Like, so
Yeah.
that's kind of like resonant after the fact. It's still kind of there lingering, but I've gotten a lot better. For the people who really feel like that was important to this, in the sense of people who feel guilty and anything like that,
Yeah.
it was
How do you take away that guilt?
it was a hard pill to swallow. My therapist was like, Sam, like, people who commit suicide decide 3 months before. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah. Like, he was like, most often than not, like, they're not usually walked off the ledge. And I was just like, dang, like, really? And so like, there's a lot of people who have that, who do get the opportunity to be walked off the ledge, and like, aren't really that within that final month, maybe something changes or maybe something doesn't. But it is really, really hard. It was a hard pill to swallow for me once my therapist told me that. I was like, okay. So I took on that approach. I was just like, if I'm sometimes a stubborn person, or like sometimes like we cut people off in life, we have a definitive boundary. And so in mentally, we're just like, okay, like, I'm not having this in my life anymore. That's almost as much as what someone feels,
Mm.
supposedly. Like, I'm not, claiming to feel that on any other side, but I think for me, I kind of took that approach of like, okay, if someone has that much of a definitive thought 3
Mhm.
months before, and like, that's, I can only have empathy for them. Like, I can't feel guilty for the things that I could have done or I could have said, because ultimately I may have not changed their mind.
Right.
Like, I just may have not been able to be that person. Like, I could have, maybe, but like, you're going to run through a rabbit hole of being of all the ifs and the should-haves and could-haves and would-haves. And it's not worth it, because I mean, with the way that with all the things that my dad was going through, and all the things in my family was going through, we went down the rabbit hole several times of just like, oh, what if this happened? What if this happened? And like, what if this, all of these things transpired, and it got exhausting. It
Mhm.
really did. Like, it took us a second to just be like, you know what? We're never going to know. And that's the whole thing, is just when you're grieving and when you lose someone like this, it's just like, you have to find closure in not knowing, because you're never going to.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about before of how we can't make assumptions and we can't do anything like that. Like, we simply can't, because we don't know, because the person who could attest to all of that, is gone.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard realization. But a lot of things in life aren't going to, like, we're not going to get closure from or direct closure from. So we just have to simply be okay with not knowing. And, eventually sometimes, I mean, me and my mom, like, we have conversations of like, maybe like this happened or maybe this happened. And we're like, okay, like that was our one what if for today, and then we're good. Like now it's much easier to let go. But back then it wasn't. But now I think of it just like that. It's just it's not worth the rabbit hole, because at the end of the day, the person who really knows the truth is never going to be able to give me answers.
And like you're saying, they're so deep in their thoughts, and they're so deep in it. It's not just they wake up that day and it's just like, oh, today's the day. Let's do this. This is a good thing for today. Like it's a long time coming, and it's not something often where one conversation is going to turn things around, because like you're saying, that they're so polarized with their thinking, and they are so stuck on the one side of it where they really, really believe that is their best choice. They think their life is a certain way that it probably really isn't, and they only see it that one way. So it's not fair for people to think like, if I would have made that one call, if I would have had that one conversation, like it wouldn't have been enough. More than likely, it wouldn't have been enough to change things around, right? And often maybe it would be enough to change their mind for a day or an hour, or maybe you would have stalled things. But for those people that actually go that far, their brain is so unbalanced in their thinking that it takes a lot more than just the one conversation. And I say this because I know, because I've been there. I was suicidal many times in my life and had severe depression. And I know it wasn't just a one day thing. And I know when I finally realized and understood, it was my brain being so imbalanced with my thoughts and really believing things were one way so strongly. It put me in that state. And I just have to say to the people that are listening and watching this episode and dealing with these types of things, like, you really can rewire your brain. You can change your thought patterns, and you can see things differently, and you can change your perspective on it. You have the choice of how you view everything in life, right? Every conversation somebody has with you, everything that they say to you, or anything that happens to you, somebody rear ends you, somebody says something mean to you, somebody, cuts you off, whatever, all those things, we have a choice on how we view them. We could get angry, or we could just be like, oh, what's the lesson I need to learn from that today? Or I hope they have a better day. Like, like, we have all these choices, and often people that are severely depressed don't see the choices.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and as a person who's also been there myself, of just being depressed and like suicidal, it's just like it's a very dark place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And not everyone has the opportunity to like have that mindset shift of just like, okay, like I need to be the one to pull myself out, because it is a lot harder with like clinical depression and just being in a depressive state. Like, it is so harder. And like, the one thing I found solace in with myself was, I said, there's always a silver lining to something. Like, it has to be better than this, because, okay, maybe it's not gold. Like, it's not perfect. It's not pristine. Maybe I didn't win that first place, but it's also not bronze. Like, I'm not in third. Like, I'm not like
there, Sam.
yeah, I'm right there in the middle. So I was just like, if I can find the middle of just everything, of just finding my ground zero, of just being like, okay, like, this is my silver lining, and that's all I need to get through. That's what ultimately changed my mindset long term when I was suicidal and depressed at one point in time. And the same thing when grieving. It's just, you know what? All of this sucks right now. And it's literally terrible. I remember even feeling like I had a really bad depressive episode when my dad died, and that was really hard. And I remember being like, I told my therapist, I was like, am I gonna be okay? Like, this freaking sucks. Like, I'm crying every 10 minutes. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna get out of this. And now I look back at that moment and I was like, oh no, she got out of there. And
Yeah.
it just took time.
And I think, like, when you're saying all this, I think about myself, and I think others, like, you often feel like, no, nobody else feels this way. Nobody else really feels this bad. Like you think you have it the worst and no one else feels this bad, or I can't reach out to somebody because they won't understand. And that's the one thing people have to realize. We are not alone. We are really in this together. And if you reach out to somebody and they don't know how to help you, they may know somebody that does know how to help you, but there's always going to be someone that can help you. So keep trying and keep reaching out, right, to find somebody. And I mean, luckily it sounds like for you, you kind of figured it out on your own that like, okay, there's got to be a silver lining. Because I remember like when I was a really young kid, I was super depressed and I would just like pray about it. And I'm like, God, please change this. This cannot be. This cannot be. And I couldn't even understand though. I was like, why would I keep living if this is what life is? This is miserable. I feel so miserable.
Yeah.
And it's not till probably 20, 30 years later where I'm like finally realizing I had to go through all those things to learn and to understand and to appreciate and get the perspective.
Yeah.
And it's funny because as I say that, I can like energetically feel people rolling their eyes and thinking, no, like you don't get it. Like, and it's like, I do get it. I promise. I really do get it. I was very much there and very much wanting to be done with my life. And I very much was. I got to a point where I've shared this story a few times, but I ended up looking in my bank account. I was like, how much money do I have? I'm going to spend every dollar I have to try to save myself. I'm going to find the best therapist I can find on the planet. And I kept circling back to this one. And I was like, okay, there's a reason here. Like this must be meant to be. And so I ended up going to that therapist and he definitely changed things for me. I mean, my whole life I was told I had a chemical imbalance and that's, it just was what it was. And I had to take these medicines and it never made me feel any better. It made me feel numb, but I never felt any better. And now with all that I know, I do strongly question chemical imbalances just because I
Mhm.
think they are so often, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm not giving medical advice. This is just my personal experience and opinion, but we can change the chemicals within our body with
Mhm.
our emotional state. That is a fact. And so for these people that you think are chemically imbalanced, yes, that is true, but what part are they playing in it is the question.
Mhm.
Because I was playing a part in it, but I didn't know and I didn't understand. And that's the thing you have to take into account is yourself and think about like, how do I feel? I don't feel good. I don't feel happy. I'm sad most of the time.
Yeah.
What is that doing to me chemically? So yeah, the doctor's right. I have a chemical imbalance, but where's that coming from? And how can I start to find joys and switch the chemicals within my body? Because we all can find joy. We can. I mean, like who could look at a puppy and not like smile, right? Like I mean, and if you can't, then yeah, there's definitely a big
Well,
problem. But
there's a lot of like almost just needing that validation of just wanting to be heard that I feel like a lot of people go through. And in that same position where I was just like, ah, like, like screw it. Like the amount of money that doesn't like, it doesn't matter the amount of money that I will spend on therapy because ultimately it will help me. But the one thing that has changed because like I said, like I lost a lot of people. So like really it wasn't until like October of 2023, like literally last year, to where I had just stepped out of my hermit shell, like when I met you, and like I was at Build Your Brand Live, and like I was really like, oh my God, like I'm meeting a lot of people, like this is happening really fast. Like that's when I really changed my life. But before then, like the way I found solace, because it's like not everyone has the opportunity to have therapy and get therapy, which I do recommend 100%. But like I said, the big thing for me was phone calls with my dad. Like I always wanted to call him. And so like I would start doing that. I would just voice memo myself, just being like, "Hey dad, how are you?" Like I would just tell him what I wanted to tell him. Sometimes I would just be sitting there because my dad was the kind of person, I love him, but he was also kind of a narcissist. And so like I could call him about things, but I wouldn't actually get practical advice. Like he would just be kind of there to be a soundboard or to just be a wall to talk to. So sometimes I would call him, like fictitiously call him, and I'd be like, damn, like I could call you about this, but you really wouldn't tell me anything I wanted to hear right now. And so I was like, okay, like, love you. And the more I started to do that, I was like, I felt really resistant to listening. And then, without having a lot of people around me, I was like, damn, like, I really got to get myself out of this hole without feeling like I need to immediately call someone. Because my partner at the time was like, I'm so busy, like, please stop calling me. Like, I want to help you, but I can't. And I was like, okay, sorry, like, I'm just struggling, but like, like I couldn't do anything about my mental state. And so I changed those phone calls into pretending I was talking to a friend. And so I would voice note everything how I was feeling. And because I'm a person that likes to talk it out, like I love talking it out. And so I just talked about everything I was feeling, and whether it was like 15, 20 minutes. So like my walk around my neighborhood it takes me about 45 minutes to walk around the whole thing. And so 20 minutes I would just vent. And then for the other 20 minutes, I would listen. And I would just cry because I would be like, dude, like, no, like that feeling is valid. Like, it's all good. Like, I would just reassure myself and just be like, okay, no, that's a valid feeling. Because like listening back to yourself has so much power. And I think like all of the things that you were just talking about, at the end of the day, it's like sometimes you just want to be heard because we're so mistaken sometimes for the things that we're feeling, for the things that we're going through, because it feels like no one else can get us and like understand the moments that we're in. But if we took a moment to feel how we were feeling and like we're self-reflected, it's so powerful. And so when I started doing that, that's when I really started seeing change, because I was just like, no, that's valid. That's valid. Oh my God, that's so valid. Like, you're not overthinking. Like, you're just like, and I was just like, I was pretending like I was talking to a friend, just being like, oh, because it's almost like listening to knowing like the Solomon paradox, right? Like King Solomon in the Bible was really this man who just gave this amazing advice, but he could never take the advice on himself. And like Alex Hermosi talks about this a lot. And he was just like, the guy's life was in shambles, but he would give this amazing advice, or like advice to other people. So how could he self-reflect that and turn that into himself? And so for me, that's my Solomon paradox. Like I use that, and I'm just like, okay, I need to just listen to myself, because at the end of the day, not everyone is going to be there for you at the exact moment that you're going to need them. And so how can you just put a pause and being like, okay, if that person can't talk to me until Tuesday at 9 a.m., because we all know we have busy schedules, then how can I put a pause in that and self-reflect, because I just need to be heard at this moment.
I think that is so key, and something I talk about a lot too for people struggling with anything in life. It's like, it's that self-reflection where you reflect and you think, but you ask yourself these questions, like the hows and the whys, like, how can I do things differently? Or why am I feeling this way? Like, really, why am I feeling this way? What has happened in my life that has made me feel this way? And like, okay, these things have happened, but how else can I see it? What other way could I view this? Because like, I view my life this way, but could I view it differently?
Yeah.
Could I? You can. Or even taking your life and applying it to someone else, right? Like pretending your whole life scenario is someone else. And it's like, what would I tell them? Or are they seeing it the way others see it? And even like stop and think about when other people tell you their personal stories and how like, oh my gosh, the world's falling apart because this and that is happening in my life. And sometimes you're kind of like, it's not that bad. Like, you don't say that to them because they're already in it and like you're just letting them talk it through. But the point of that is that there is another way to see it, right? You don't see it the same way they see it. And it's the same with your own like very personal life and personal feelings. You see it one way, but you could see it another way.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. That's like, exactly like it's all a matter of perspective at that moment, and like how we go about it. So the original question was asked is just like, how can you be there for yourself and get support? That really is like, you ultimately, the challenge is to find support in yourself, because like I said, not everyone is going to be there for you, but because like in boundaries, but then not everyone is going to be able to be there for you in that moment that you need them. So you have to find something that is going to give that ultimate pause until you can talk to a therapist, until you can talk to like this and this, because it's just bottling it up doesn't serve anybody any good. Like, you have to deal with it head on. And like, that's the one thing that I learned through this whole process, is that I could waste years of my life not dealing with any of this and not dealing with things when they come up. And that to me is a waste of the things that I meant to do, because I'm always going to feel like I'm in fight or flight mode instead of just stopping and pausing and dealing with it.
Choose you. Like,
Exactly.
with all you're saying, I'm like, choose you is what I'm hearing. Like, choose yourself. Choose yourself.
Yeah,
Because when you do, you will start asking yourself those questions and you will find a way to figure it out.
exactly. The one story I'll add of that ultimately helped a lot of healing with my dad. I don't know if y'all like ever like really believe in like dreams, and so like how when like some people visit you in your dreams, and maybe you could be on the same, I don't know if it's like an external plane or like but you're on the same almost wavelength as them. And my dad visited me in a dream, and this man, I can see this so vividly because we were at like the house before my mom's currently in. It was the house before that, and this man handed me a baseball bat, and he said, "Go to town." And I beat the ever loving shit out of that man. I like this what he was bloody and blue, and like I was so mad because it's just like there's so much aggression. And granted, this is a dream, because like in a dream you are never allowed to like actually physically fight someone. So to feel this and like, oh my God, girl, I woke up and I was like
That's it.
I was like ready to go. Like I was ready to fight someone because it felt so real. Like I had so much amped up energy, and like I popped up out of bed and I was just like, whoa, like that was crazy, but it just was so healing for me. So I'm grateful for like that moment of like that dream, but like that's probably the funniest thing that happened, because
Do you
I was
think it
like,
was do you think it was healing because you had this awareness of like, wow, I've got a lot of anger towards this man? Or do you think you felt the healing from the dream because you felt like you actually like released all that anger within the dream?
I don't think all of the anger was really released in the dream, because there was still like I mean,
But it brought maybe an awareness that was
it did bring
helpful.
in, yeah, it did. It definitely brought in awareness, because I mean, to a large part, a lot of the things that my dad did, I just like lost respect for him. I really did. Like I was just like, I loved you and you were supposed to be this amazing man. And my vision of him just completely changed. But a lot of that was just I was just able to release it and have this moment with him in this like dream plane that was just like, thanks. Like there was no other possible way that I was ever going to be able to do that unless that was brought to me in an opportunity in a dream. I was never going to see him again. I'm not going to like go do anything crazy. Like, no, that dream, it was releasing some of it. And that made me realize how angry I really was. And so, like,
Probably an acknowledgement too. That probably felt like an acknowledgement from him. You're like, okay, like he knows I am not happy with this and all the things that have happened. So there probably was a lot of emotion that came from that led to healing.
yeah, no, exactly. Like, I just got like, chills around it because it was just like a, like, it was just very healing. It was
Yeah.
very healing. Because like sometimes if it's a dream or like a moment, you just got to realize that losing someone to suicide is just multifaceted in itself. Like you are not just grieving one avenue. You are grieving a lot, because it's just not the same. Like you're not just like losing someone to something that's super tragic and like a blink of an eye. Like this was someone's choice. That's the hard part. Like
Mhm.
you have to fight against someone else's choice.
Mhm.
And it's just like, damn, like that you're fighting you're fighting someone else's battle, and you can't do that, because it's just like if someone was taken away from you just like out of circumstantially, like that's totally different. But like this is like someone else's choice.
Did you ever, because as you're saying all that, I'm feeling like there's people that feel sometimes when they lose someone that they really care about to suicide, they feel like their thoughts towards that person are, how could you not love me enough to choose differently? Like,
Mhm.
did you ever feel that way? Like, man, you didn't love me enough to choose differently?
I'm going to say something that sounds crazy. In the experience of what um everything that was going on with my dad. I think it was almost just like, it's going to sound so crazy, but it was almost just like you loved me enough not to like force me to see you in prison and like force me to like see you in a different light and like have all the things, because it's just, it would have come with a lot of different things that it would have just put
Yeah.
us in a whole different light, and it would have not been pretty. And so I mean, it's almost like, for me personally, like, I think he knew that was kind of the end of his line, like,
Mm.
because he needed to deal with a lot of things on his own end. He really did. I don't know what happened to this man. I really don't. Like, long term in his life, like if he ever did or didn't go to therapy, like whatever happened to this man, I don't know.
Yeah.
But to a large degree, he didn't deal with a lot, because it's just like the anger, and like, because like I said, this man was true narcissist, like class A, like, and that comes with a lot of trauma. It does. And so on my end, I was almost, it's not even grateful. Grateful is a wrong word for it, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like a really understanding of just like, it was a whole different meaning for us, for him to be gone that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that sound crazy?
No, I mean, it's understandable. It's like you understood that in the grand picture that this probably was maybe what just was best for everybody. But
Yeah. And
in a weird way. But
yeah. Circumstantially, like to anyone else listening, they'd be like, that's freaking crazy. Like, that's your dad. Like,
you can say that, you
yeah.
know?
And like, my circumstance is very, very different than a lot of other people. Like,
Mhm.
like this is not even scratching really the surface of like what the actual true
Yeah,
essence of what this
yeah.
meant. So like, just know that for y'all, like, listening. There's a lot behind this door that I'm not saying out of respect for my family and respect for a lot of situations. But for other people going through it, um, it, you have to decide what that person, like, if that person meant for you, and like ultimately like their path is going to look very different, because it's like some people who lose people to suicide, it's detrimental. It really is just like that person was a huge part of your life, like that's your husband, that's your partner, that's your friend, that's your family member, like whatever that is. And however you choose to look at it long term is going to be up to you. And for me, long term, after 3.5 years, I've chosen to look at it with grace and be like, long term, this, I miss my dad every single day, but there was kind of no other way for this to go.
Yeah, you understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing this story. I mean, that's not an easy story, I'm sure, to share or even talk about, but I'm sure you'll probably be hearing from more people now about going through similar things because, I mean, you're not the only one that's lost people to suicide. So where can people find you if they want to reach out to you, and just tell everybody a little bit about what you do in case they just want to connect with you for other reasons too?
Yeah, no, just so y'all know, like, I do understand the situations. I do understand what it's like to lose someone that you love. And like, even though my situation is very different and I have a very different approach on it, um, please DM me. Like, I have no problem with that. Like, I'm on Instagram at Sam the Branding Coach, and you can reach out anytime, because it is not easy to go through the loss of just generally losing someone. But I can tell you that I wasn't in a place of receiving then, but I am in a place of receiving now, to where I can receive someone else's energy and be like, dude, I hear you. Like,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, sometimes that's all we want. So a few years ago, I couldn't say that, but now I can. So if you ever need to reach out and just talk or like vent or send me voice notes or like however it is, I really, I recommend, because I'm in a place of receiving and I can hear you. So on the other side of things is knowing my name is Sam the Branding Coach. Like, my real name is Samantha McGinley, but I'm a branding and marketing coach, and I teach people how to show up on social media. So it's very contrasting to this conversation because it's a lot lighter, but um I really help people define like what their brand is on social media and how they want to represent themselves. So even though that's my Instagram for my business things, come to me for personal things for sure. And if you need help with branding and marketing, you know where to find me.
Email. Do you want to share an email or
Sure.
whatever you want to share?
Yeah, no, an email is fine. I think you can find my email on my Instagram as well, but just Samantha at polariscreatives.com. And I'm sure you'll have it you can put it in the comments or in the intro or in the bio of the podcast, and people can find me there. But email me your stories. Like if you want to talk about it, I'm open.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I have to say to everybody watching, same as Sam is saying, reach out to me if you're struggling with anything. I can connect you with her if you can't find her for whatever reason. Like I've shared, I've gone through it too, as far as the depression goes. So if you need help finding resources, reach out to me and I'm happy to try to point you in the right direction, because I want everybody to know there is always, always, always another choice, and it does get better. I promise.
It
And
does.
it does. It does. And there's always a way to figure it out. There's always a way to find what you need. And there's definitely a way to shift your mind and not view things the way that you do. Your perspective can shift no matter what traumas you've been through. And that's part of this show, is sharing a lot of extreme traumas that people have walked through, but been able to change their outlook, even though they haven't been dealt the best cards. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea.